Snow fell like whispered confessions, each flake a secret carried from heaven and left gently upon the aching earth. The prairie had gone still, cloaked in a white hush that swallowed hoofbeats and heartache alike. A wind wove through the brittle fence posts, whistling soft warnings, but inside the barn, Colt Rollins only heard the rasp of his own breath and the slow shuffle of the bay mare in her stall. He'd just finished tightening the harness on the plow horse when he felt it, a shift in the quiet. Something not wind, not beast. Something human. Something broken. The barn door creaked, not from a storm's push but a hand. Then a figure, barely more than a shadow, staggered in, clinging to the doorframe like a drowning soul catching driftwood. She wore a tattered coat 2 sizes too thin, boots muddy to the knee, her dress sodden and torn at the hem. And her belly, round, swollen, spoke of months gone by and not many left ahead. "Help me, please." The voice cracked like a dry twig underfoot. She collapsed. Colt stood frozen. Not from the cold but from recognition. The face, even weathered by wind and grief, hadn't left his memory in 6 long years. "Sadie Mae," he whispered, but it barely left his mouth. He moved fast then, quicker than he had in months, kneeling beside her as snow spilled in behind her. Her skin was pale and clammy. Her fingers, though trembling, reached instinctively for her belly. He lifted her, light despite the child she carried. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and her scent, smoke, sage and faint lilac, rushed in like a song he'd once known by heart. He laid her gently by the stove inside the bunkhouse, fed the coals, and pulled the quilt from his own bed to cover her. She didn't wake, not fully, but murmured something. A name, maybe. Not his. Outside the wind picked up again. Inside Colt paced. What the hell was she doing here? What had she run from? And more terrifying still, what if it followed? The last he'd heard of Sadie Mae Coulter, she'd married Eli, a wild one, a gambler and a gun hand, a man with silver lies and mean fists. Colt had buried her memory the day he heard the news. And then 2 years later he buried his own wife and child under the cottonwood tree out back. But now Sadie lay breathing beneath his roof, carrying another man's child, shivering in the same quilt his wife once stitched. He watched her through the low firelight, the way her brow furrowed even in sleep, like she couldn't quite trust safety, even in dreams. In the early light she stirred. Her eyes opened, green, clouded with exhaustion but unmistakably hers. Colt knelt beside her with a mug of warm water. She blinked at him, slow and uncertain. "You're safe here," he said gently. "You're on my land. Colt Rollins' land." Something shifted behind her eyes. Recognition. Then shame. She tried to sit up but winced, hand to her ribs. He steadied her without a word. "I didn't know where else to go," she said finally. Her voice, though hoarse, held that same fire, dimmed but not dead. "You could have gone to town. They'd know who I am. So do I." She looked away then toward the frost-laced window. "I ain't come to bring you trouble, Colt." He didn't answer right away. Instead he stood, walked to the stove and poured another mug. "You come alone?" She nodded. "You hurt?" Another nod. "Your ribs. Fell off the wagon. 2 days back." Silence stretched like barbed wire between them. "Eli?" he asked. Her jaw clenched. "Dead." "How?" Her eyes didn't leave the window. "Rode drunk into a storm, never came back." "Convenient." "Wasn't my doing if that's what you're asking." He wasn't. Not really. But the thought had brushed against his mind like a cold hand. She looked at him then really looked. And for a moment, something old flickered in her. Some girl who once danced barefoot in summer fields, who used to braid her hair with wildflowers and dare him to kiss her under the stars. "You hate me for leaving?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead he placed the second mug in front of her and walked out into the snow. She watched him from the window as he chopped wood, every strike deliberate, like he was carving space between past and present. She sipped the water slowly. Her belly shifted under her hand. The baby kicked. Inside, the warmth soaked into her skin but not her bones. That night, she sat by the fire stitching one of the old dresses hanging on a nail behind the door. It belonged to someone else once. A woman softer than her. Kinder. Probably braver. Colt came in from the barn and hung his coat without speaking. "I didn't mean for this," she said without looking up. He didn't ask what she meant. He just sat across from her, cleaned the dirt from his hands with a rag. "You stitched that wrong," he said. She gave a tired laugh. "Been a while." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind howled like something mourning. He nodded at her belly. "You got a name?" "Not yet." "Boy or girl?" "I don't know. Feels like both some days. Neither others. He chuckled low. The sound surprised them both. It's yours? He asked softly, though he already knew. She nodded once. What'll you do? Try to live, she said. Best I can. She held the dress up to the light. The stitches were crooked. Unforgiving. You'll want the bed, he said. I can take the cot. She looked up at him. You don't have to do this, Colt. I can move on come morning. No one's making me. That settled it. For now. Days passed. Snow deepened. Her strength returned slowly, like spring reluctant to arrive. She fed the horses when she could. She cleaned the stalls. She cooked. And every night they shared quiet, by the fire, across from each other, saying little but listening loud. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she traced the quilt with her fingers as if memorizing its warmth. One morning, while brushing the mare, Colt turned to find her standing just inside the barn. She looked fragile. And yet, something unbreakable lived in her now. You want to learn to saddle? She nodded. He taught her the buckles, the straps, the weight of leather. Her hands fumbled at first. But she kept at it. You always were stubborn, he said. Didn't serve me much good. Served you enough to get here. She glanced at him, surprised. Then smiled faintly. Later that evening, just as dusk painted the world in violet and ash, a horse's cry split the silence. Colt stepped out of the barn, shotgun in hand. A rider approached. Drunk. Mane. Scar on his cheek. He reeked of old whiskey and older grudges. I'm looking for Sadie, he slurred. Eli's girl. Colt stood his ground. Ain't nobody here by that name. The man laughed. Saw the wagon tracks. I know she came this way. And I got business to finish. Colt cocked the shotgun. But before he could speak, Sadie appeared behind him. You got no business here, Jed. The man sneered. Ain't up to you. She stepped in front of Colt. One hand rested firmly on her belly. Then it's up to me. Something in her voice, something steeled by pain and fire, made Jed blink. He spat into the snow. You're both gonna regret this, he muttered, turning his horse. They watched him ride into the dark. Colt shut the door. Locked it. Sadie sagged against the wall. You should have let me handle him, he said. I've let too many men handle things for me. She crumpled onto the floor, sobbing now. Everything she'd carried, the shame, the fear, the loneliness, tumbled out like flood water. He sat beside her. Didn't touch her. Just waited. When she quieted, she asked, voice hoarse, Why are you being kind? Because I remember the girl who gave me her locket before she ran off with a man I warned her about. She stared into the fire. I lost that locket. You gave it. That's all that matters. The snow kept falling. Weeks blurred. Her belly grew heavier. He built a cradle from pine. She washed every piece of cloth in the house. They never spoke of marriage. They never spoke of love. But one morning she woke with pain clawing her from the inside out. Colt found her curled on the floor, biting her lip until it bled. He lifted her without hesitation, placed her gently in the bed. Time warped. Hours melted like icicles under sun. Then, a cry. No. A girl. Alive. Sadie wept, her face pressed to the baby's head. Colt stood silent, shaking, cradling life where once he held only loss. That night, he stood with her beneath the cottonwood tree, swaddled child in her arms. The moon hung low. Snow glittered like stars fallen too soon. Marry me, he said softly. She turned, tears in her eyes. No preacher. No need. And in the hush of snow and breath, they became something old and new again. Not perfect. Not painless. But whole enough. And somewhere inside that barn the past exhaled. And peace settled in, quiet as snowfall.